Hello, and thank you for tuning into Abduction from Victim to Survivor with Sarah and Abby. Our podcast is about family abduction, custodial conflict, and the stories of those who've lived through it. They're stories of pain, hope, and resilience. Abby and I are very passionate about helping people understand what family abduction is, the harm it causes to the children, the searching parents, and those who love them. And we do this by sharing stories of those affected and having conversations with people who've experienced this and with experts in the field. And our mission is to create a safe space for heartfelt and difficult conversations. This is personal for us. I'm Sarah, and I was abducted by my father as a 4-year-old and raised in hiding for 12 years.
And my son was abducted from me and his life when he was 10 years old.
Family abduction can be a global issue and is a global issue. Cases cause trauma and heartache for all involved and often cause diplomatic crises between countries. We want to emphasize that time is of the essence when it comes to recovering abducted children. The longer they remain missing, the more pain and trauma the children will experience.
We're in this together. Today, we are so honored to have Scott Byrne as our guest. Scott and his brother were abducted as children by their mother. And today, Scott is not only a survivor, but he is an author and children's right advocate who has used his experiences to help other children. He has shared his experiences with many audiences on national television, including the Oprah Winfrey Show. And Scott is a past board member, and he is a spokesperson for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He not only speaks about his own personal experiences, but he's also diligently working at education, prevention, and legislation to help protect children. He has lobbied from Albany to Capitol Hill to help change the criminal laws of parental abduction from a misdemeanor to a felony. Scott is not only a survivor, he is a thriver, an advocate for children's rights, and uses his experience to help others. He's written a book entitled Extraordinary Circumstances about the journey of his childhood experiences, and he is here today to share his story with us. You will see from his story how Scott is a strong example of traumatic growth. You will understand his resilience, determination, compassion for others, and deep desire to help people recognize that taking a child from their life, from their parent by the other parent, is harmful to the child and wrong. Welcome,
Thank
Scott.
you for
Thank you
having
so
me,
much for
Abby
being
and
here.
Sarah.
Thank you so much. Scott, I have not had the privilege of hearing your story. I have to get your book, and I will get your book. And I think that there are going to be some parallels in our stories. I'm older than you, but I'm really really looking forward to hearing your story, and I'm really in awe of
Thank
everything
you,
that you've
Sarah.
accomplished.
Survivors and thrivers of parental abduction have a lot in common. And so as I tell my story and we go back and forth, you're going to see we do have a lot in common as far as our survivals.
Yes. So yes, without further ado, Scott, what happened? When did it
Well, it
all
happened,
begin?
started when I was about 8 years old. Grew up in a suburb of Rochester, New York, both parents, and had a dream childhood. It was affluent, two loving parents. And around the age of 8, they started fighting with each other. And it immediately escalated to violence between my parents. One experience that I had was I actually intervened, my mother going after my father with a butcher knife. Those were the extremities of the fighting between my two parents. So as it went from that, this occurred for about 6 months. The things I witnessed between them. My dad came home from work one day and found that in the front yard, all of his clothes were on fire. My mother had set them on fire. There were other times when they were fighting so bad, doors would get knocked down. It was really violent between the two of them. And it culminated when my mother decided one day to burn our house down, and she burned it to the ground. And during this period of time, there was a custody trial, because as my parents were divorcing, each of them were going for custody of myself and my younger brother. Um, it culminated because of my mother's actions. My dad received custody of us at a time when fathers never received custodies. This was 1979, and mothers automatically got custody of their children. So it was very rare. And on the first unsupervised visitation, my mother kidnapped us. We immediately got in the car from the hotel where my dad dropped us off. We drove from Rochester, New York to Boston, Massachusetts in a taxi cab, where we immediately boarded a plane and we left the country. From there, we flew to Puerto Rico, and we ended up during a 2-year period of time living in 13 residencies, 5 countries. We changed our names constantly. And my mother made it a game for us. In a sense, I use the term that she made me my own captor by making it fun. We were with our mother. She allowed me to change my name to Joe. And at that time, the Hardy Boys were Joe and Frank. So my younger brother and I, we became Joe and Frank. And it felt really cool. So, and then she did other things to make us our own captor. She told us as we traveled that if we got caught, she would take her own life and it would be my fault. So she made it so that we didn't want to get caught because I didn't want my mother to take her life. We did not go to school. If my mother felt the need to leave, she gave me no notice, meaning she would just pack a quick suitcase, we'd disappear, and wherever we had been living for a short amount of time, we had to leave it all behind. So even if I had a pet, the pet was left behind in the house. That kind of instability during the 2 years was instilled in me, that there was just no security or stability that I had known growing up with. We had no friends. I was not allowed to ever use my real name. I wasn't allowed to contact my dad. I did not go to school. And she constantly had a fear instilled inside of me of authority. So if I saw a police car or a policeman, my heart would drop, thinking, oh my goodness, I have to do whatever I have to do not to get caught. At the same time, my mother, unlike the first 8 years, she became very physically and mentally abusive. If I did something wrong, I got hit for it, I got yelled at it, and I began to fear her. And that made me more of my own captor as well. I was a fear of her wrath. Um, Jumping ahead 2 years later, this went on for 2 years, and we lived in Puerto Rico. We lived in St. Thomas. We lived in Venezuela. We lived in Curacao. And we returned to Puerto Rico, which seemed to be like a home base for us. And then we returned to the United States and went to Houston, Texas. Why Houston? I learned years later that Houston and the state of Texas did not yet recognize the custody of other states. So she saw that as a safe place to return to the United States without us getting caught or me getting returned to New York. Our life became quite normal there. We bought a house. She actually enrolled me in school. And before school started, which would have been grade 5 for me, I was around 12 years old. A babysitter that we were with recognized my photo, my brother's photo, and my mother's photo in the August 1981 edition of Ladies' Home Journal. And it turned out that my father had been looking for me all those years. And my mother had brainwashed me that my dad wasn't only not looking for me, but he had passed away. So I had assumed that he was dead until that day that I saw he was looking for us in the magazine. That dramatic day was, to this date, I'm 56 today, and that was still the most dramatic day of my entire life. Immediately, police officers came to our apartment, brought us down to the main office, um, set a trap for my mother to come to that office, and at which time the FBI was waiting for her. um, when she pulled in the parking lot, we were inside, so I didn't get to actually see it, but we heard cars crashing as she tried to get away, people yelling. I heard that guns were drawn, and she was immediately brought into the same office that we were. Um, Probably within 20 minutes, my dad was actually on the phone and he was saying, "Scotty, is that you?" And I said, "No, this is Joe." We were so brainwashed that I didn't even know what to do. I didn't think my dad was even alive. And they didn't know what to do at that point with a parentally abducted child. So we spent hours in this office with the FBI, the police, and finally they put the three of us into a police car, cars behind us, cars behind in front of us, and we went to the police station where they took my mother out of the car in handcuffs and took her away. And at the same time, they took myself and my younger brother to juvenile hall um, because they honestly didn't know what to do with us. So for the next 2 weeks, I was in jail for a child. My brother was put in a different area for younger kids. I was given a roommate, never forget his name. His name was Danny, and he was in juvenile hall for murdering both of his parents. And it was just the two of us in a locked cell. There was one small television, two bunk beds. And the only way that I learned what was going on with my parents was on the 6:30 news. And that was with Dan Rather at that time. And I heard what was going on. What it had come down to, and I spent 2 weeks there, was because my dad's custody was not yet recognized in Texas, and a custody battle ensued that was focused nationally. And after those 2 weeks, there was a ruling, President Jimmy Carter's ruling, the 1981 Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act allowed for my dad's custody in New York State to be recognized in other states, including Texas, whereas we then got returned to my dad. Um, my dad was brought into the judge's chamber where my brother and I were, and to say the least, I was so brainwashed. I said, "I want to be with my mother. My mother's going to kill herself if we don't get returned." And we went off with my dad and investigators, and it was an elaborate trip home. We went through many different states, from planes, trains, cars, because my mother was in the national news vowing that she was going to physically get us back. And there were viable threats to intercede and get us back. We got to Rochester, New York, and I'll never forget sitting on the airplane at the Rochester International Airport. And I asked my dad, "Is there going to be anybody waiting for us here?" And he said, "No, we should be okay." We got off the plane, and it was a sight that's on the front cover of my book, and a sight that I'll never forget. There were hundreds and hundreds of news reporters and cameras, and my dad had to answer questions. People were asking me questions as I stood in shock. And that was just the beginning of trying to reacclimate into my old life. My dad had the house that my mom burned down rebuilt. So even though it was different, it was the same house. He had Christmas gifts for us over the last 2 years that were under a tree that he never had taken down. He had also remarried. So we were introduced to a stepmother. and this whole new world. And at the same time, we were watching my mother, still in national news, who did attempt to take her life. And we saw a helicopter in the front yard of the house that we had lived just days prior. Her suicide attempt was not successful. And there was a very long, acclimation stage. We were not allowed to leave the house without private investigators, police officers constantly at the end of our driveway. I got reintroduced to school, and everyone thought it would be best that I go into school where I left off with all my friends that I grew up with. So I actually missed fourth and fifth grade, and they put me right into sixth grade. Um, there were police officers outside the school, FBI agents in the classroom sitting in the back because of the constant threats of my mother. This went on for almost a year, at which point there were other things going on in court that I was too young to be brought into. But the final ruling was my mother was not allowed to see me or my younger brother again until we were 18. And at that time, I was turning 13. Over the years, things did calm down. My mother made an attempt on my 15th birthday to have not only my dad, but myself actually killed. She sent a hitman to our house, and it was thought the situation was thwarted, as far as my dad and I standing at the top of our stairs in our house. My dad had a gun, and the investigators and the police got wind of this, and they got into the house, and they were able to apprehend the hitman. There were no more attempts after that. She never got in trouble for it. She never served any jail time for the uh, attempts on our life, for the abduction, and for burning the house down. She never served a day of jail. Um, at that time, parental abduction in New York State wasn't even on the law books, so it wasn't even a misdemeanor. And ironically, today, it is still a misdemeanor in New York State and is not a felony, whereas other states it is a felony. Um, I grew up, went to high school, had a normal high school years, best friend, first car, dating, and I never spoke of my situation or my circumstances because I just wanted to be like every other child growing up, wanted it to be normal. And it was. It wouldn't be until my second year of college that my dad would call me home because my younger brother was being brainwashed by my mother once again. And we did not know that that had been going on for 2 years. And my brother was using that to torture my father, uh, in the sense that, well, I'm not going to go to college. My mother has more than enough money to support me. If you don't do this for me, I'm going to go back and live with mom. And that continued until I found my dad, who had attempted suicide on his own because he could not take the torture anymore. I was able to intercept some airline tickets that were at the house. I destroyed them. It angered my mother and my brother to the point that he left to go. I knew I had to get him out of the house if my dad was going to live through this. My dad went into a hospital, and I actually got charged by my mother, brother, in the United States Post Office, and I had to hire an attorney because my second year of college, I was facing multiple years in federal prison for destroying those tickets and signing for them with my name, and I forged a name, and I knew it was the only way to get my brother out of the house. Long story short, for the first time in 5 years, I had to call my mother and beg her to have the charges dropped, at which time the post office said if she dropped the charges, they would drop the charges. It was a very difficult conversation. It was condescending. And the last thing she ever said to me was she asked me my height. And I am 5'7". And the last thing she ever said, she said, you are too short for any woman to ever love you on the face of this earth. And that was the type of manipulation and control that I had as I was growing up and learning what she had done. That was exactly what I had wanted to get away from as I was growing up. And I was sucked right back into it. After that, I went back to college. Life got normal. My dad got better. And I actually never spoke to my brother ever again. I never spoke to my mother. I heard from my mother indirectly because on her 60th birthday, she committed suicide and she left me a suicide note. And the suicide note is the last page of my book. And in summary, what it says is she always claimed to be the victim. She wished she could have been part of more of our family time. It was all my fault. It was my dad's fault. And this was the only option left for her. And that's how it ends. I went on to graduate college, do normal things with my life. And then I saw as I became a young adult, why did I learn? Why did I survive all of these experiences? What was the purpose? Why didn't I just get married and have kids and a normal job, just like all my other friends in Rochester did? And I learned, and I thought to myself, it's time to start using my experiences so that other children don't have to go through what I went through. Because I was used as a pawn. My mother was more about using me to get revenge against my father than was what was for the best interest of me and my younger brother. I went on to go, as Abby mentioned, many talk shows, audiences, things like that. But what I realized the most was the talk shows sensationalized my my experiences, and that was not what was in my heart. And one day I reached out to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that's where I met one of my dearest friends, the executive director, Ed Suk. In fact, we just had lunch together just 2 days ago. To this date, he's one of my dearest friends. He showed me that it didn't have to be sensationalized. He opened a door where I got to meet other survivors, whether it was a parental abduction, stranger abduction, sexual exploitation. The list goes on, as we know, crimes against children. And I finally felt like I wasn't on this deserted island by myself. I could get up there and talk on a show um, with the National Center. I could be with them in an audience, whatever the venue might be. And I'm using those experiences to make a difference to this day so that children don't have to go through what I just described to you. And that's the reason why I'm on your podcast today as well. So that's a wonderful summary of
Yeah.
my experiences. I went from victim to survivor to thriver. And that thriver stage is a forever stage. When I'm in my 80s, I hope that I'll still get invited to a podcast or to speak in front of an audience or a show, because that is the forever stage of making a difference.
Wow. Scott, oh my God. Yes, there are parallels here. I mean, I have chills and just your experiences. I just kept saying quietly, I think it was quietly, oh my God, oh my God. And then the next thing happened. I'm like, oh my God, that happened too. And just an absolutely like unbelievable story of such crazy extremes that you had to go through. One thing that was so many things struck me deeply, but one thing that you said just hit right very, very deeply, and that the day that you were recovered changed your life forever. The trauma of it, the intensity of it, the betrayal when you recognized the day that, and this was the case for me too, the day that I'll say we recognized that the parents who abducted us didn't do it for our good, but did it for their own purposes, and that we were used as pawns. That incredible sense of betrayal, that's the
Yeah.
day. There's a
Yeah.
before and after for me for that. That even rises above the events of the abduction day, and being on the run and changing identities and all of that, that day, because we rest as children in this idea. We assume that our parents put us first, that, or that at the very least, that what they do is, especially something as huge as an abduction, is is to save us from something
Absolutely.
and from
One
someone, is, and that at least that it's right, and that it's for our best. So yeah, it's so important to me that we who experience this as kids really highlight the incredible trauma of that moment, and of that, when we're aware of that, and how that, protecting children from that somehow, at least understanding it, acknowledging, validating when other children go through this, so that, because there was nobody really talking about that. People just, oh, great, you've been reunited. How great. Now life will be great. Life is happily ever after. No, that's
Yes,
when the work
yes,
began, in some ways, of trying to make sense of all of it, trying to rebuild some kind of trust, and some kind of trust in ourselves and our own perceptions. Because I know for me, I thought, wow, I've been duped so badly, I must be so stupid. And that carried for such a long time, and I understand
absolutely.
now that I wasn't stupid at all, but I felt so,
It's
yeah, I felt so bad just about having
yes, but
bought
I
the
look at it
Kool-Aid in a
this way,
way.
and this is such an important.
Scott, I wonder too about the relationship that you had with your mom. It sounds like you were adultified, like you felt like you had to take care of your mother. And I'm wondering if your brother felt the same way as you, and the difference in the two of you and the relationships
Yes.
that you had
I
with your
wanna
mom.
address both of your points. I'm gonna first go back to Sarah's point because that might be the most important thing that we speak about on this podcast today, and that is the fallacy that stranger abduction is worse than parental abduction, where it absolutely is not. We are raised to trust our parents, and if we cannot trust our mother and father, it creates a break of trust and a betrayal that is greater than any other trust that could possibly be broken. And we carry that into our relationships today. I'm 56 years old and I have never been married. My ability to trust is forever, just held back in every way because of losing her trust and her breaking that with me. So I have been asked numerous times at speakings, well, you're with your mother. It's not that serious. But again, that betrayal and that turning of events and that mental abuse is far much worse than even stranger abduction. So, very important point.
Oh my God.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Scott, Scott, I just want to say that thank you for expressing that so succinctly. It's so validating to me, and it's so true. It's a primal wound that is so intense that it takes my breath away even thinking about it today. And I know in my case, when I met my mother again, it wasn't happily ever after. We had our own issues as well. So it was like a double loss. Like I lost um my this trust that I thought that I had with my father, and this understanding. And then when I was reunited with my mother, it started all over again, this journey of trying to understand one another and rebuild and deal with our own issues, and it really wasn't easy. So there's so
I
many layers. So thank you
absolutely.
so much for expressing that so
I gave you a lot of
clearly.
strength for that reunification with the abducting parent. I, on the other hand, decided not to do that. When I was of age, around 15 or 16, I thought, well, here I am. If I can't trust my mother, how do I know I can trust my father? So what I did was I got tubs of court transcripts and the magazine articles and the newspaper articles. I needed to learn for myself who was telling me the truth, my mother or my father. And as I learned that my mother lied to me so much, about things that she had made up. She had told me that she did not burn our house down, but she really had. And it was on file and it was there in black and white. And the list goes on and on. And that compounded with the physical abuse, the mental abuse of manipulation, control, making me my own captor, I decided I was never going back to that. There was no way to recover from that. When she sent a hitman on my 15th birthday, there was no going back. So to answer your question, Abby, absolutely, my mother did adultify me in the sense that not only was I responsible for her not taking her own life if we got caught, but I had to take care of my younger brother. My mother's extreme mental and physical abuse against us made it so I was no longer a brother, but I was actually his father. I was putting his needs before my own. I was looking out for him. And here I am, 10 years old, 11 years old, and then 12 years old. And I didn't get to be a kid myself. She took my childhood away by adultifying me. And that's what parental abduction does to a child. It makes you an adult and it steals your childhood. So, really good question, Abby.
Yeah. So you and your brother had different relationships with your mother. Is that
100%. 100%. I
yeah.
was old enough to see what was going on, not quite understand what was going on, but I was aware of it. Where my brother, there's a 5-year difference. He was much younger and he was simply with his mother. Whether there was abuse or not, he was still simply a child with his mother. So the dynamics were very different. And after the kidnapping and after being reunified with my dad and us going through the years, he never saw anything wrong with it. So he never did the homework to see was mom telling the truth or not, because it didn't affect him that way. And in essence, he went back to my mother after the experience I described with my dad, and my dad and I never heard from him again until he hired an attorney to sue me when my book came out. But I quickly won that because my book's 100% factual. As you hear, there's nothing I need to embellish. It's quite dramatic
No,
in its own regard.
totally. Far
Wow.
too, far too dramatic. Yeah. So hard for you at such a young, tender age to endure all of that and to be the adult and have to be the adult in that situation, not knowing where to turn and not knowing, who could help you or who you could trust. It's just
100%.
overwhelming, Scott.
That is the importance of making parents aware of what's going on with parental abduction, because back in the 80s, our divorce rate wasn't half of what it is today. So behind every divorce statistic is a child. One of the most important questions I've ever received in all of my years of doing this now, and I've been out there for a good 18 years, sharing my experiences, letting people know what is important to put the best interest of the child first. And I was a guest speaker. There were several hundred people. This was in Utica at a conference center, and I'll never forget that not too far up away from me were these two parents, and they were holding the hands of a little boy. And he looked exactly like me at 10 years old. He was wearing a little baseball cap, little baseball jacket, holding the hands of both of his parents. And the father asked the question and said, "We're getting divorced. What can we do to put the interest of our child first?" And I thought, wow, if my parents had only asked that question, I'm getting goosebumps from it right now. It's the most important question I've ever received in my life. And I went on about just what we're talking about and hopefully made a difference in that little boy's life going forward.
Can I ask what you I'm sorry, can I ask what you told them?
I told them to not put their fighting and their want to get even with the other parent, whether who's right, who's wrong. They have to work together in making sure that that little boy's interest is put first. That not only parental abduction, while it might sound extreme, a child caught in between two divorcing of parents is very dramatic. In fact, the period of time that my parents were fighting, when I look back, was more traumatic to me as a child than the actual parental abduction itself. Watching my having to stop my mother from killing my dad with a butcher knife, she would have killed him had I not started screaming at my dad to turn around. That is ingrained in me forever. I remember what it was like sitting on the floor underneath that kitchen table as I was screaming, and I saved my dad's life that day.
Oh my
So
God.
it's so important that the parents put their own differences aside, handle it maturely, put the best interests of your child first, because you are traumatizing that child no matter what you put them in between.
Unfortunately, it sounds like your mother was not capable of that she must have had a mental illness that was driving her because she went above and beyond what someone would have done in situations like that. She had violent tendencies. And it's just, yeah, because Sarah and I were actually talking about that earlier today about what could change in the system to prevent these these things from happening. But in a situation, unfortunately, like yours with your mom, it wasn't the system, it was your mom's mental illness.
It was, however, I don't believe in excuses, and I know that sounds harsh.
No,
Whether
yeah.
um, there are consequences, as adults, we're responsible for our actions. She could have gotten the assistance she needed so that they could have shared custody or whatever it might have looked like. It didn't have to be as extreme as it was. But look at 5,000 parental abduction cases annually right now. Not all of them are mental illness. There are other circumstances as well. Sometimes it's simple anger. So we can't look at parental abduction as just, well, that happens to mentally
No, not
disturbed people. This happens to your neighbors, it happens to our friends, happens to us. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, this affects everyone. And that's really important for us to get out there. No one is immune to crimes against children,
oh,
especially when there are two parents involved.
right. Absolutely. No, I was just talking about your particular situation, really, with your mom. Well, Sarah and
Mhm.
I didn't come to a conclusion about the system. It's something
Well,
that's gonna be an ongoing conversation.
it is, however, there are steps to answer your point on that, and I have been involved in that thanks to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I have testified in Washington on Capitol Hill. I've been to Albany. I've met with senators. I've gone with teams from the center to make lawmakers aware of what they need to do to keep our children safe. And this isn't just a New York issue, but this is a worldwide issue. I am part of an organization where I am part with parents. It's called I Stand. And these are parents who have their children abducted overseas. So we're not talking about a local, state, or national issue. We're talking about a global issue.
Yes.
What can we do at these different levels? We could make our lawmakers aware of what it does to the children. Parental abduction in New York State should not be a misdemeanor. It should be a felony. Does it mean more money spent by the state? Yes. But if parents are aware that they're not just going to get a slap on the hand and they are going to face serious jail time, and then they're going to see that they're going to rethink their actions because there are more serious consequences. I have been told by lawmakers at all different levels, well, that means more money spent on incarceration, more, prosecutions, more on keeping people in jail if it's a felony. Those are legitimate issues, but what's more important? um, the welfare of a child in their state, in their country, in their world, or those fundings. And that's something that we have to fight and make the lawmakers aware of in order to make that difference. And that is how we're going to change the system.
It's such a tough one. I don't know for me personally if incarceration is the solution and tougher laws. Maybe. I think it's one part of the puzzle. I agree with you that it shouldn't just be a misdemeanor. But but yeah, it's such a conundrum because I know that for me, my father going to jail for what he did to me would have traumatized me more. And yet, so it's so hard to figure that out. And I respect what you're saying because we do need it to be taken more seriously. Uh, uh,
Thinking I
mm,
think an important point for me to make on that is my goal is not to put parental abductors into jail. It's a deterrent. If if they're looking at the possibility on one side, well, if I take my child and I'm only going to get a slap on the wrist, okay, I could get away with that. But if they're looking at it and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose everything and I'm going to go to jail for a period of time, isn't that a wonderful deterrent? That is the key word that I is one of my personal goals. Let's pass laws and make deterrents so that parents second guess, second think what
right,
they want to do.
right.
No, I mean, I agree with you in some situations. However, in New Jersey at the time when my son was abducted, it was a felony and it did not deter his father. So, but his father also was not a well man. So it's so hard
There
to
there
generalize.
it is hard to generalize, and we shouldn't generalize because every case is different.
Yes.
Yes, there was mental illness with mine. Yes, there was mental illness in your situation with your husband. However, in the big picture, if we have these deterrents in place, we're going to bring down that number of parental abductions annually. If we could bring every single life that we make a difference in, makes us
Mhm.
successful.
Yeah.
Right.
I went to a convention once for bail bondsmen, and they had I thought was a great deterrent where during a divorce, if one parent was afraid that the other parent would abduct their child, they would have to provide a monetary bond that was going to be held by the court just in case there was an abduction. And that bond would be used by the searching parent to search for their child.
That's
And
great.
I think that would sometimes be more of a deterrent for the abducting parent because it's money. Uh,
Absolutely.
yes,
That's a wonderful example of a
yeah,
deterrent. If we
yes,
could get that at the federal level, that's
yes,
one wonderful deterrent that is gonna keep kids safe.
yes. I wholeheartedly agree. I love that idea.
I wanted to just jump in because I agree with you, Scotts, about something you said earlier. It's not just dramatic cases like yours and like mine, like ours here. It's the everyday, so to speak, divorces and the children and the whole family units affected by them. And I, over the years, my own sort of activism has stretched to what does a successful split and separation look like, and how how the folks who are managing to do it well, to preserve the child's innocence and love and integrity, because it's traumatic enough. A regular old good separation and divorce that involves custody is traumatic enough for everyone
Absolutely.
who's been through that because it's such a loss. It's such an integral and fundamental loss when parents split up. Um, so I've been so interested also in looking at the flip side. Who are the folks that are managing these things well? What are common threads? And I mean, I want to give a shout out to people in my town and people in my family who have dealt with infidelity, bad, like really bad, painful situations, and they still show up and co-parent together.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yep.
right, people who've lost money and pride and homes and careers and all of those things, and they still manage to remember that, "Wait a minute, this we made this child together. We can preserve this child's heart by co-parenting." And, it's amazing to see the folks who are able to do that, and it takes a tremendous amount of strength to do that, to keep the temperature down if when they can,
Exactly.
right?
And
And
what
so
does that is if two people divorcing in those situations simply put whatever their difference is aside and they put the best interest of the child first.
right,
That's it. It doesn't
right,
matter what the circumstances. Two parents do that, the child is going to be less traumatized. And I emphasize less traumatized because, as you said, a divorce is traumatizing, but they're not going to have to face what you and I face.
exactly. I'm still in shock at everything you went through, from the butcher knife to the island hopping, to the names, and oh yes, the name thing. Absolutely. And the identifying, you used a better word, but like that identifying, becoming partners in our own abductions, in our own captivity, so to speak. And just the utter control, and the fact that your mom tried the ultimate act of control, and that is to blame you for her suicide. And I'm in such awe at the process that you must have had to go through and still go through to kind of really keep centered and keep strong and recognize you have such clarity and such and self-awareness and insight on what happened here. But you lost out on so much. You lost out on your relationship with your brother because of your mother's actions.
I
Uh,
lost yes,
yeah,
absolutely, and my
yeah,
relationship with my mother, I didn't
exactly.
see her for 25 to 30 years until her suicide, and then I still didn't, so, yes, by the time I was 14 years old, I did not have any relationship with her, so nobody wins in these situations, even divorce. This isn't a case of, well, who wins or who loses. This is about going from victim to survivor to thriver. And that includes the parents. They could survive their circumstance, they could thrive, and it alleviates the traumas. And that's the importance of what we're talking about.
Yeah. That they could
Exactly.
let go their need for control and just step out of themselves and focus on the child. It would just be better for everyone involved. But unfortunately, not everybody's able to do that.
The only way that they're going to become aware is by doing things like we're doing right now, getting the awareness and the education out there that this affects anyone in any social economic setting. Um, and by doing that, then we're gonna keep our kids more safe.
It's more
Exactly.
likely that the person you've pledged your love to will take your child than someone that they don't know. And
Absolutely.
that's just so horrific,
Mhm. That is the importance of getting the word out about parental abduction.
right?
I
Yeah,
I could go on and on. We could do a separate podcast about going from survivor to thriver. It's a
yeah,
process that starts with the awareness stage, and the forever stage, as I call it, is the giving back stage. Here
mhm,
I am at 56 years old, and I'm still giving back. And as I
mhm,
said, I'll do it until the day I die.
yeah. That's,
That's
amazing, and
wonderful.
it's wonderful, and Sarah and I feel the same way about what we're doing, and, I mean, we really appreciate you being here and opening your heart and talking about all these painful things, and the one thing we like our guests to do, towards the end of the podcast is to just answer one question, and that is, what do you want to leave our audience with? What is the most important thing that you would like them to know?
That's easy for me because that is my mission with using my experiences. Yes, I have to use the dramatics, I have to use the situations, I have to use the scars, but to culminate that all into one equation. And it's as simple as this: awareness plus education equals prevention. If we remember that one equation, then we're going to be able to keep our kids safe.
Thank you,
Wow.
Scott.
Thank you so much. I feel like we, in some ways, just scratched the surface. There's your wealth of knowledge and information and resilience and growth. So more to come. I feel like this isn't the last
Yeah.
conversation we're going to have
I
with
would
you.
I would love that. I would love that. So invite me back.
Yeah.
We will. We will.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This
Yeah.
is just
Thank you
wow.
for having me, ladies.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank
it's a
you.
prime story to help people understand that it's not okay that you're with the other parent. There was nothing that was okay about your story and about your journey and what happened to you. And, we're just so sorry that you had to endure that. And yet, just, I'm so proud of you, Scott,
Thank
for,
you, Abby. Thank
for,
you. The purpose
where
of
you've
my
been and where you are.
well, we look for a purpose in every experience. The
Mhm.
purpose why I survived it today the way that I have and grown from it is to make sure that other children don't have to go through what I experienced. And
Exactly.
that is the purpose of my survival of these experiences.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
I'm grateful.
Thank you. We end with some information about some currently abducted children, children who are dealing with family abduction as well. So today we are highlighting twins. They are two little girls named Sophia and Amelia Vincent, and they are missing since July 21st, 2025, from Provo, Utah, here in the United States. They're both 6 years old. They may be in the company of their mother. So, for those of you not watching on YouTube, you can go to missingkids.org to see them and other children, and you can search by area and so see if there are any children in the area that you live in. So you can, any sightings of them can be reported to the Provo, Utah Police Department at 801-852-6210, or you can call 1-800-THE-LOST. So thank you for looking out for them. We always like to highlight kids that are going through this at this moment in time. And we want to thank you for joining us this week. You can always reach out to us, check us out online. We have a Facebook page. It's the Facebook page is the name of our podcast, Abduction Victim to Survivor. Please reach out to us anytime with questions, comments. Anyone who'd like to be a guest, we'd love to have you. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Bye.